Jouer contre les appareils.
Playing against cameras. We're going to be talking this evening and each evening of this week in the Antique Theatre, we're going to be talking about experimental photography. And it is Marc Lenot who is going to be talking to us about this. You're no doubt familiar with Marc Lenot, and you no doubt read him on the website of Le Monde newspaper. He's better known under the name of Lunettes Rouges, which means red glasses. And this evening, in a 3-episode series, he's going to take us on a journey through experimental photography. Marc Lenot. Hi, Marc. Thank you. Thank you very much. This evening, Thursday evening and Saturday evening, I'm going to show you some work that I've been doing in recent years on the idea of experimental photography. A fist, a raised fist. Is it a rebellion? Is it a demonstration? Or is it a fist to knock against a door or window? No, it is a photographic fist. A photographic fist? What does that mean? A fist that takes photographs. I will speak more about this on Saturday evening, but what I wish to begin to show you today are different ways of taking photographs, different ways that go against the very rules of photography. When I began to take an interest in this subject of experimental photography, I quickly realized that neither in the dictionaries nor in the encyclopedias were there many texts and a lot of reflection on experimental photography. And yet there are photographers who over the past 45 years, I think, have been taking this type of photograph. This is what I'm going to try and unroll before you. For me, all of this began about 40 years ago, when a certain number of conceptual photographers started to think about what photography actually is. Not the use of photography as a means for their art, but to think about the elements, the parameters, the procedures of photography itself. What you have here on the screen is a piece by William Anastasi in 1967. Anastasi positioned himself in front of a mirror, shot a Polaroid, stuck it on the mirror, took another one, stuck it on the mirror, and did it again 9 times until the mirror was entirely covered with these Polaroid photos. It's a useless photograph, which doesn't show anything, but it's the first reflection on what photography is. Amongst these conceptuals, maybe the best known is Augelas. This photograph dates back to 1970, so that's 2.5 years before Meulas disappeared. Meulas photographs exhibitions and found himself in Rome in an exhibition where he photographed a performance of Yannis Kounelis. And this performance consisted in a pianist playing the same tune every day for 1 month, 1.5 months. Meulas wondered, well, how can I tell the tale of this photographic time? And what Meulas did is he went every day and he took the same photo in the same place of the same pianist playing the same tune. Except instead of showing, as we might have expected, one photograph, he decided to show the contact as a whole in order to show the unrolling of photographic time. Here again, for one of the first times in the history of photography, there is a presentation of the image of photographs that go against the rules and shows a contact sheet. The same Meulas created this photograph in homage to Marcel Duchamp, which is also a contact sheet, which is entirely unused, with no information, and it is placed under a glass plate which is broken. So here, in around 67, 70, 71, there are others also, a certain number of conceptual artists who are beginning to question what photography is. And for me, they are the ancestors of experimental photographers that I'm going to be talking to you about over these 3 days. So there are different ways of breaking the photographic rules. The first, and is the one that I wish to show you today, is quite simply to take photographs without a camera. What does that mean? Well, here are a few examples. The British photographer Chris Bucklow took these photos without a camera, simply with the sunlight that makes an impression on film and within a defined outline. So we could call this an anti-photogram. The sun goes through hundreds of thousands of minute holes and leaves its impression on this film. This is a type of photograph that really breaks the normal rules of how you use a camera. Here are a few other examples of photograms. The British photographer who lives in the United States, Adam Fuss, worked at length with photograms, and in particular created photograms such as this one, which consist in a glass pack beneath which is the photographic paper. There is the baby is in a sort of a bath in tepid water, and the photograph of the baby is taken. So this process, once again, breaks all the rules of the use of a camera. Another big master of the photogram in the 20th century was the German Forrest Neusus, who lives in Kassel, and he created many life-size photographs. This one is 2 meters high, I think, of bodies that seem to float, that seem to dance within this white world. Another example with a French artist, Henri Foucault, who to begin with was actually a sculptor, and he also makes photograms of bodies, but because he works with sculpture, he tried to give it a third dimension, a sort of a thickness. So there are 2 photographs, one next to the other, that are pierced with holes in order to create a sort of relief to this body. And you can see here that there is a sort of form of dimension that comes out of this photograph. The photograms that we've seen so far are photograms that represent something, in particular bodies, and that are a representation of something. But we can go beyond this process of representation and make photograms where the image that is represented whilst being a photograph becomes far more difficult to grasp. Walid Beshti, who is a British man who lives in the United States, does this type of photogram, which, it would seem, could be abstract. They could be simple drawings, but in fact, it is a rather particular and original process where Beshti puts in his case sensitive paper and travels from airport to airport. First of all, the suitcase is not entirely light tight, and it goes through security gates. And after 2 or 3, 4 journeys, the sensitive paper has impressions that remain on it. So it's still a photograph. There's still sensitive paper and light, but this photograph no longer represents only represents the concept of a journey that Bechty went on. And each of these photographs bears the name of the journey. Another example of the use of photograms, which is quite different from what we do currently. The British photographers Adam Broomberg and Oliver Channerin, who take all types of photos, were invited to work with the British Army in the north of Afghanistan as embedded photographers to bear testimony as to what was happening in the battlefield in the north of Afghanistan. Instead of entering into that process, instead of setting off with the army and their cameras and photographing the war, they decide to criticize this mechanism of embedded photographers, and they set off with a film roll of 50 centimeters long and 1 meter high in an airtight container that they cut up into 7-meter strips. And every time there is an interval in the war, they get out of the armored tank that they're in and they unroll the 7 meters of photographic paper. And these 7 meters, this photographic paper, are imprinted by the light and the dust. This image, which is 7 meters long, and that we did a travelling shot on, doesn't represent anything. You can't see anything that says that this is Afghanistan, that tells you what it's about, except for the fact that it is the testimony of 2 photographers who were on site and who took a photograph. Final example of a somewhat unusual photograph that I wish to show you. Morgan Adawi, who a few years ago was a student in the Higher National School of Photography of Arles, creates prints of his own body. So she covers certain parts of her body, her breasts or her genitals, with a paper, after having protected her skin, of course. And sometimes this is done in public or semi-public performances. And what you have here is a print of the body of the photographer made in this way. So these are a certain number of examples of photographs that I call experimental. We will talk tomorrow and the day afterwards a little bit more of the definition that I propose. Photographs that break all of the rules, that are different from customary photographs. I will continue with another dimension of this experimental photography, which is to play with the camera, to do things that are rather unusual with the camera itself. You're familiar, no doubt, with Miroslav Tichy, a Czech photographer who passed away 6 years ago, and who had an exhibition in Pompidou in 2008, and who has an exhibition as from Friday in Marseille. And Tichy makes his own cameras, so from using pieces of wood, plastic tubes, glass from glasses, children's toys, elastic bands, builds these sort of monsters that you can see here, cameras that actually work, and with which he takes photos. And the photos that he takes, this is an example here, he photographs mainly women who he follows about in the streets of his little town, are photographs that are badly done, in the sense that the cameras are far from being perfect because the light comes in from all sides. Or he develops these pictures in the wash basin, in the sink, in his kitchen sink, and so they're badly printed, and he blows them up himself. And as you can see, he improves them by making some small frames. So this is an example of a photographer who doesn't accept standard industrial cameras and decides to build his own. Another example of playing with cameras, the British photographer, Mr. Pippin, Stephen Pippin, who for the past 2 weeks has been exhibiting in the Pompidou Centre in Paris, does different work, and this work is called The Death of Photography. Why the death of photography? Because Pippin sets up a very complex mechanism with which he shoots with a gun he shoots a camera with a gun. At the time when the bullet passes through the camera, the flash sets off, and therefore the film that is there records an explosion, records pieces of plastic and glass debris flying all over the place. And Pippin is playing with this concept of this is the end of the camera. This is the end of photographer, the death of the camera. Another example, which is ironic, of a rather strange camera is by the Swiss duo Honorato and Krebs. They use standard mechanisms of photographic chambers, but they make them from different things. So you have tortoise shells, but I like this one because this one, as you can see, is made with books on the history and theory of photography. You can see Ansel Adams, Susan Sontag, and a few others. And to succeed in taking a photograph with this camera, the light or the potential picture has to cross through the entire theory of photography, which is a rather funny, ironic reference. So I will leave you for today with this photo by an Italian photographer, Rosella Bellucci, and you can see this is an extraordinarily white photograph that I will talk to you about not tomorrow but the day after tomorrow, when we once again talk about playing with light and playing with other parameters of photography. Thank you very much.
Marc Lenot, lunettes rouges.
Marc Lenot, lunettes rouges. And you can continue the experimental adventure of Marc Lenot with the book that he has just published, Playing Against Cameras, published by Photosynthèse. But we will be with him again with great pleasure on Thursday and Saturday. So see you soon, Marc. See you on Thursday.